Terrorists strike Europe with twin bombings in Brussels. See the aftermath of the attacks. Stepped up security, how law enforcement is responding around the world. President Obama repeats calls to end the Cuban embargo.
I'm Lauren Ashburn in Havana, Cuba with President Obama. We'll give you the Cuban reaction to his statewide speech.
And response from Capitol Hill. Congress focuses its attention on human rights. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday of Holy Week, March 22nd, 2016. Smoke fills the Brussels airport seconds after an explosion. It's one target in a series of terror attacks. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick, and ISIS now claims responsibility for today's bombings in Belgium. One bomb exploded in a Brussels subway train. Two more detonated in the airport, where a third bomb was later discovered and deactivated. These bombings killed at least 31 people and injured more than 200 others. A Belgian prosecutor says police are conducting raids across the country, searching for terror suspects. They released this picture of one of the suspects, a man spotted on airport surveillance video. The damage at the Brussels airport is obvious. There is widespread destruction, even flames at the site of the terror attacks. Two bombs ripped through the airport's departure hall, killing at least 10 people. Many more were injured, including 3 Mormon missionaries from Utah. The airport will remain closed at least through tomorrow. This amateur video shows subway passengers escaping through smoke after the bombing on the Brussels metro. They had to climb from train cars and walk along underground tracks. Today's terror attacks in Brussels come just days after Belgian police arrest a key terror suspect. Lars Adaktusson was caught in a police raid on Friday. Investigators believe he is one of the terrorists behind November's attacks in Paris. Prosecutors are unable to confirm now if there's any connection between the terror attacks in those two countries. President Obama says Americans stand in solidarity with Belgians in condemning attacks against innocent people. He says the U.S. will do whatever is necessary to bring the terrorists to justice.
This is yet another reminder that the world must unite. We must be together, regardless of nationality or race or faith, in fighting against the scourge of terrorism.
Pope Francis condemns the blind violence that breeds so much suffering and implores the gift of peace from God for the Belgian people. The Pope's comments come in a telegram sent to the Archbishop of Brussels. The Pope says he is praying for the victims, their families, and the emergency responders. Police step up security at airports, rail stations, government buildings, and other key sites around the world. Wyatt Goolsby is here now with more on that.
Brian, European leaders have been holding emergency meetings. Some countries are warning their citizens not to travel to Belgium right now, and the lockdown in Brussels is prompting many countries to deploy increased security, including police and undercover officers.
Belgium raises its terror threat level to its highest as the news raises tensions around the world.
I can't explain. It looked like war. It's unbelievable. It's really hard.
The explosion at this subway station is located near a number of European Union institutions. It's also near the World Youth Alliance Europe. Eva Rona, the director of operations, tells us she gets off at the same metro stop every day.
I'm really shocked. I've never suspected that something like this can happen. Actually, just right now, through the window on my right hand, I can hear the evacuation action happening.
Well, Rona says fear grips Brussels as authorities advise residents to stay home with their families. American cities are reacting by beefing up security. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio says there is no credible threat to his city, but extra officers have been dispatched to train stations and bridges. In the nation's capital, authorities have increased police patrols on the metro, and commuters say they are paying close attention to what's going on.
I'm probably more diligent in my surroundings.
It definitely put people on alert, make people more vigilant about, just looking around and being, protective of others.
I'm not going to stop living or stop using the subway.
Other major cities in the U.S. are increasing security. They include Miami, Chicago, Atlanta, Boston, and Los Angeles. Officials say if you're traveling through by air, you can expect to see enhanced surveillance. Brian?
Thank you, Wyatt. And since Brussels is home to the EU Parliament, these bombings are seen as an attack on Europe. Ed Pentin is our Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Ed, attacking Brussels is really sending a chilling message to all of Europe. What are you hearing from people there today?
Yes, well, we've had statements from the Pope and from Belgian bishops. We've had them from all across Europe, really, of condemnation and condolences for the suffering. This has been kind of expected in a way because of the attacks in Paris last year. Belgium was on high alert, and so is the Vatican and so is Rome. There's a great sense of fear, really, that the attacks might spread throughout Europe.
Well, this is Holy Week, and crowds normally really gather there at St. Peter's Square for all of the Holy Week observances. Are you expecting any scheduled changes in the wake of the bombing?
Not as yet, Brian. I think they're going to carry on as normal. There may be fewer crowds, of course, who are scared away from it. But at the moment, there's been no word. I think that the general sense is to carry on with life as normal, but to be extra vigilant. But I haven't heard at least any changes in the program yet.
You mentioned specific threats against the Vatican. Do you notice any increased security?
Not a great deal, to be honest. Certainly at Rome Fiumicino Airport, they've brought in sniffer dogs, apparently. There's been a certain stepping up in the main sort of port areas of Italy. But in the Vatican, at least, there's not been a great visible sign of any increased security. Although since the Paris attacks, there has already been an increased and very visible step up of security. We've had soldiers patrolling around the Vatican buildings for the last few months, and so I think that's going to continue. But certainly there's been no visible sign of any increase just yet.
Well, we pray for a safe Holy Week, and we thank you, Ed Pentin from Rome.
Thanks, Brian.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Some Arizona voters waited in long lines today to cast ballots in their presidential primary. Arizona and Utah hold primaries today, along with Democrats in Idaho. We'll have results tomorrow on EWTN News Nightly. President Obama delivers a speech directly to the Cuban people today. He is calling for a major change in restoring relations.
As President of the United States, I've called on our Congress to lift the embargo. I've made it clear that the United States has neither...
Obama asked Cubans to bury the last remnants of the Cold War and leave the past behind. His address was carried live on Cuban state television. He used the occasion to push for democracy in Cuba, admitting it will not be easy.
There are still some tough fights. It isn't always pretty, the process of democracy. It's often frustrating. You can see that in the election going on back home.
President Obama also met with Cuban dissidents today. His critics say he should do more to address Cuba's human rights abuses and demand freedom for political prisoners. Obama closes his visit to Cuba with a baseball game this afternoon. The Tampa Bay Rays played Cuba's national team at the Latin American Stadium. Cuba's president, Raul Castro, also attended the game. Our chief White House correspondent, Lauren Ashburn, is joining us from Havana. Lauren, how is the president's speech playing out there?
There is one word that I keep hearing over and over and over again, Brian, and it is courage. The Cuban people truly believe that Barack Obama has courage to speak truth to power, and power in this case is Raul Castro. I have interviewed more than a dozen people, shopkeepers, maids, people who clean this building that we're using right now, who have said they are very excited about the possibilities that this brings. And in El Gran Teatro, where President Obama gave the speech, there were lots of people who were applauding and clapping, even when he was talking about human rights violations.
Many of the dissidents there in Cuba are faithful Catholics. What are you hearing from them about the religious freedom that they seek?
Well, there are many faithful Catholics that I spoke to. I went to a convent today. I went to a nursing home today where nuns were ministering to the aged and to the poor. What they are telling me is that there are two types of Catholics here. One, who are very vocal and challenging the government, and then there are those who are doing their jobs. They're bathing the old, they're caring for the young, and they are content to watch Cuba grow slowly. And in that way, they are contributing to the peace and prosperity here.
Well, as you return to the United States, can you give us just a little bit of a summary of your visit there, the time that you spent with the folks, and what your sense of this new relationship between Cuba and the U.S. is?
The word is ánimo, which means excitement. That is what the Cuban people feel, and they hope that it continues not just through this administration, but through the next administration. There are many entrepreneurs who spoke with President Obama begging for the internet to be open so that they could conduct commerce. They have ideas here on how they can use apps and tools on the internet, but they can't get access to it. The excitement is palpable from everyone.
Well, you had an opportunity few of us get, and we thank you so much for sharing it with us. Lauren Ashburn, we pray for a safe trip back to the U.S. for you.
Thank you, Brian.
And the president left Cuba late this afternoon en route to Buenos Aires. There he will meet with Argentina's new president. As President Obama wraps up his visit to Cuba, some U.S. lawmakers focus on human rights abuses there. Our Catherine Szeltner reports from Capitol Hill tonight. Catherine?
Brian, lawmakers at a House hearing today say the Cuban government is involved in human trafficking. It comes as the State Department prepares to release its annual report on this form of modern-day slavery.
Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey says Cuba's government makes money from child prostitution. Smith says last year, the State Department gave Cuba a pass on the issue so President Obama could carry favor with the Castro regime.
You saw Raul Castro said, what political prisoners? Give me a list. Well, I have a list in my hand of 50, at least 50 political prisoners. The president should have responded immediately, here's the list, free them all, and he didn't.
Maria Verlau told lawmakers Cuba is guilty of fueling sex tourism, forced labor, and the sale of human body parts. The Cuban native works to advance human rights on the island.
People can draw their own opinions as to whether we should continue lending credibility and impunity to a criminal dictatorship, or we should continue trying to make nice to them and engage them in their terms.
Witnesses also testified on abuse claims in China, North Korea, Burma, and other nations. They say they hope the State Department's next report on human trafficking will be victim-centered. Brian.
Thank you, Catherine Szeltner at the Capitol. Coming up, we remember a priest killed in the Congo. We have the story of what led to his death. And standing with Israel, Republican presidential candidates voiced their commitment to an ally. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday of Holy Week. I'm Brian Patrick. Why are you killing me? Those were the last words of Father Vincent Machosi, an Assumptionist priest killed on Palm Sunday in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Assumptionist website reports soldiers of the Congolese armed forces killed the 50-year-old priest. His superior says Father Vincent was gunned down in a convent courtyard as he was working on his laptop. He had been repeatedly threatened with death, so much so that in 2003 he was forced into exile in the U.S. Father Vincent reportedly escaped 7 bombings since his return to the Congo. And a call to pray for Father Tom Azunalil, the Salesian abducted in Yemen by terrorists who attacked a Missionaries of Charity home for the elderly. The Salesian family is being asked to join in prayer on Holy Thursday for the kidnapped priest and for peace. In a video posted on social networks, the Salesian rector major expresses closeness and solidarity with Father Tom's family. The House unanimously passes a bill allowing the remains of women World War II non-combat pilots to be laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery. Jason Calvi is with the sponsor of that bill at the U.S. Capitol tonight. Jason?
Brian, I'm with Representative Martha McSally of Arizona. Tell us, why was this bill so important for you?
Well, these women, the women Air Force service pilots, they stepped up to serve our country in World War II when the country needed them. Over 1,000 of them. They paved the way for military pilots like me to have the opportunities that we had. And they were personal mentors to me. They were discriminated against at the time, not given full military honors until 1977. And then the gates of Arlington are shut on them. So I came to Congress in order to fix things that are broken and make a difference. We heard about this in January and sprung into action, put a bill out there, got a bunch of sponsors, and less than 12 weeks later, we actually have a unanimous vote on the floor today to right this wrong.
And this sheds light, I think, on the role women had in World War II. Tell us about some of the
Absolutely.
things that they
Women
did.
served in unprecedented roles in the Army, Navy, Air Force, across the board, hundreds of thousands of them. Many people don't realize we had women pilots at the time. They were ferrying airplanes. They were towing targets for gunners on the ground, practicing to shoot things down. They were training the men. We had POWs. We had 38 of these WASPs actually died in the line of duty, but were never given any benefits for them and their families or their burials. And so it's important for us to preserve their legacy and let them be laid to rest in Arlington, which is where our heroes are.
And next step for this bill, it needs to go to the Senate, and then what's the next step?
Yep.
Tell us.
So we got it through the House. We have a companion bill in the Senate. We're going to try and fast track it through, get it on the president's desk. Right now, Elaine Harmon is one of those women who wants to be in Arlington. Her ashes are sitting on a shelf in her granddaughter's closet. We've got to lay Elaine Harmon to rest in Arlington. So we're calling on the Senate and the president to fast track this so we can let her give honor where honor is due, which is important.
And this was really a surprise, right? The fact that for so long women were allowed to have their ashes at Arlington, the women pilots.
I was shocked. We thought that this was done, that the hang-ups and the discrimination that these women put up with at the time was fixed. And when it came to our attention in January, I was obviously infuriated. And as someone who was personally mentored by these women, I felt it very important for me to lead this fight to make it right.
Tell us about your own experience as a combat pilot. You were the first group.
Yeah, so I was in the first group to go through training, first to fly in combat. I flew the A-10 Warthog. I've got my necklace on right here. It's a single-seat attack airplane, and the first to command a squadron in combat. Amazing opportunities that many women before me didn't have, and these women, the WASP, paved the way.
These are the women that were in World War II doing these missions of being pilots. And
they showed that the airplane doesn't care whether you're a boy or a girl. They just care that you have the skills, you fly well, you shoot straight, you get the mission done. So they proved and opened the door for people like me to be able to serve in the way that I did. I'm very honored to have known them.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, and happy birthday
to you. Absolutely, thank you. This is a great birthday present to get this bill passed.
Brian, back to you in the studio.
All right, Jason, thank you. What a dynamic story. Returning to our top story now, deadly terror attacks in Brussels have the world on edge tonight. They hit close to home for a Swedish political leader visiting Washington this week. Lars Adaktusson is a member of the European Parliament. He is a member of Sweden's Christian Democratic Party. You shuttle back and forth between Stockholm and Brussels.
Correct.
Where and when were you when you heard of the news of the attack, and how did you react to that?
I woke up this morning very early. I got a call from my daughter. She told me, and she was, of course, very, very concerned. Then I got a number of calls, of course, from relatives and family members.
Is everybody okay?
Everybody's okay, and I also talked to my office in Brussels this morning. They are also okay. My chief of staff, his mother-in-law was at the airport actually at the time when the bomb exploded. So of course everybody is shaken and kind of shocked. But everybody is okay.
It is frightening, and it was sort of expected. There was talk of another attack. Is there anything the EU can do to protect its citizens?
We are trying to do what we can, but of course this is a challenge that is not very easy to confront. I mean, we need to do so much on different levels, and many of the measures need to be taken is also need to be taken on the national levels, on the local levels. But we can be much better when it comes to gathering information, gathering intelligence, and make it as accessible for the different police authorities. And in that aspect, I think we have much to do still.
This comes on the heels of the Paris attacks late last year. Does this enter into the refugee crisis now, how that's being handled?
Of course. There are many people think that this is a result of the migration. I don't think it's that easy. I mean, terrorists are coming and going, even if we receive refugees or not. But of course, we will be very, very cautious when we let people come in and check them and also do what we can in order to prevent the radicalization. I think that's really essential in this aspect.
Lars Adaktusson, we appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule here in Washington to visit us.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Up next, a preview of an important case before the Supreme Court. Learn more about challenges to the Obamacare mandate and drive with Francis. how a humble Fiat Popemobile is used to support Catholic charities. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem disagrees with the declaration of genocide of Christians in the Middle East. Fouad Toual tells Vatican Insider the statement comes too late when everything has already happened. Also, the Catholic Herald reports the UK's House of Lords is stepping out of the genocide debate. British lawmakers say a declaration of genocide should be made by the judiciary, not by Parliament. The U.S. Supreme Court tomorrow hears challenges from Catholic and other faith groups to the government's contraceptive mandate. Pro-life members of Congress huddled outside the Capitol today, showing support for the religious nonprofits a day before oral arguments. Our Jason Calvi spoke with Representative Dan Lipinski, a pro-life Democrat from Illinois.
If we cannot protect the little sisters of the poor and their rights of conscience and religious freedom, then I think everyone in our nation is really under threat of losing that right.
Representative Lipinski is one of the only Democrats who votes pro-life. He says this issue is not just about contraception, but the broader issue of religious freedom. Supporters of the Little Sisters of the Poor plan to rally and pray outside the Supreme Court. Included in the combined 7 cases to be heard is one filed by Priests for Life. Dr. Alveda King directs African American outreach for Priests for Life. Tell us about the prayer rally and why prayer is so key in this case.
I believe that Representative Lipinski's remarks, Brian, and the fact that the people all are congregating and coming together, whether you're Democrat or Republican, if you're American, if you're human, you have the ability to pray, and that's where we come together in prayer. We're going to be praying at a rally tonight, and then tomorrow standing out in front of the Supreme Court. Prayerfully, Father Frank Pavone will be inside. I think it's so remarkable that our religious freedom is being threatened right in the midst of these terrorist attacks, and some of that's against religious, that challenges religious freedom as well. And so when we begin to not care about human beings, and when we have to argue and fight over our differences in a violent way, then the society is suffering. And so I believe it's very important, our religious freedoms, not just the freedom to go to church and to worship in church, but we should all have the opportunity to express freely our religious beliefs, certainly without strife and violence. But the American dream, the dream that my uncle Martin Luther King Jr. had, would have said that everyone should have free expression of worship.
Your family legacy is the cause of freedom. You fit right into that. Freedom really begins with the right to live.
The right to live, the youngest, the weakest, those in the womb. When we threaten and cease to care about the sanctity of their lives, then violence will escalate. The challenges to our religious beliefs. Life is a moral right as well as a civil right. And you've heard me say before, a woman has the right to choose what she does with her body. The baby is not her body. Where is the lawyer for the baby? How can the dream survive if we murder our children?
If the court rules against Priests for Life, will you be able to continue your ministry?
Our ministry at Priests for Life, under the wonderful leadership of Father Frank Pavone, Janet Morano, I'm one of the pastoral associates as a Christian evangelist. Well, our fight continues. It would even continue if abortion was abolished everywhere right now, and it would be wonderful if it were. But then we'd have to help the families and help them to rebuild their lives. So the work will continue regardless, but prayerfully there will be the victory that we're seeking, us and the other 6 plaintiffs. I think there are 7 of us. All together.
7 total. Dr. Alveda King with Priests for Life, it is so good to see you.
Thank you so much.
You might remember Pope Francis riding in a small black Fiat when he visited the U.S. last fall. Now 2 Fiats used during his visit will soon be on display around the nation's capital. The Archdiocese of Washington placed one outside St. Matthew's Cathedral so folks could get a closer look and some pictures. The Archdiocese and Catholic Charities will use these famous cars promoting their ministries, public service, and work with the poor. They're using the hashtag #DriveWithFrancis to let Twitter followers know when and where the cars can be seen and photographed. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night. May God bless you.